Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Helps me pass on information. And if you get anything from my work, from my drop, connect the dot, mushroom cloud moments, epiphanies, please consider supporting my work. That'd be really appreciated. So I always apologize because it sucks. I finished painting my house. I did a lot outside. I didn't put the shed up yet, but I did a lot outside. I built a barbecue, a grill, and a smoker. Helped with a huge Memorial Day party barbecue weekend for We Not Me. Been doing a lot with that. So I have been trying to get in readings and trying to do a lot of research, which I am still doing. I think I have 70 articles that I have sifted and read through that I have to encapsulate in my brain to make sense out of it all, to kind of spew what's going on with my mind with all this. And I'm sorry, my back is killing me. As usual, like, when is it never hurting me? You know. So today we're going to continue this fun, the truth about evolution in the Bible. We're going to continue with we're going on to chapter 5 because chapter 4 was creation, and this is just the conclusion of that topic. So buckle up. This is a good one. Creation. Quote, I find then a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Romans. Quote, we may thus conceive of the dynamic and psychological complex above the material and organic complex, organizing and centralizing it. The real self, one and indivisible, end quote, from the unconscious to the conscious, Gailey. In considering these two verses in Genesis, referred to in the previous chapter, it should be noted that there is a vast difference in the two processes described in the two chapters. The word translated as created in the first chapter is the Hebrew word bara, whose root meaning is found in many ancient languages, Chaldaic, Samaritan, Arabic, etc., all of which indicate, quote, that the basic root is a choice or an intention or preparation of movement toward form, end quote. In this connection, it indicates that God intended and prepared a thought for a formation or made choice of an individualized aspect of himself. Sorry. For expression in those words, a manifestation which he had just projected from his divine consciousness into form. I'm going to read that again because this is vital to understand. Vital. God intended and prepared in thought for formation or made choice of an individualized aspect of himself for expression in those worlds of manifestation which he had just projected from his divine consciousness into form, into materialism, into the material world. into density. The word in the second chapter translated as formed is the Hebrew word yatsar, which means formative imagination. This plainly indicates that the man of the second chapter was the physical body or animal man who was not created or projected spiritually in the image and likeness of God, but was fashioned by the activity of a creatively formed and projected thought form or invisible pattern, which is being messed with currently, which animated the dust of the ground, just as every beast of the field and every fowl of the air was formed out of the dust of the ground. Here is the solution of the whole conflict between fundamentalists and the scientists. For the second man is the animal form, which science has conclusively shown was solely evolved from lower forms through untold ages, while the first man is a spiritual man or image of God, which was not evolved, but created by the conscious intention of the Godhead to manifest himself in form. Bingo. As explained elsewhere, this, of course, does not mean that God gathered up a handful of dust and fashioned man out of it, but it does mean that the divine ideation through the creative power of the cosmic consciousness and the manifesting power of the one life first conceived the idea and then projected it into objective manifestation. First, the idea of the earth and all things pertaining to it, and finally man himself, all fashioned out of the same fundamental and undifferentiated cosmic substance, and then clothed in a body of flesh, meat suit, composed of earthly substances, because we are water, iron. We have all the minerals and essence of this planet in us. Atoms, quarks, neutrinos, neutrons, electricity. But until this animal form had reached a certain degree of perfection, it was but an human animal, and not man as we know him today. When the proper stage of evolution had been reached, something more extraordinary took place. An addition was made which raised this animal form out of the fourth kingdom of nature, the animal, into the fifth kingdom, the human, and made that ape-like animal form more than animal. This extraordinary advance took place when God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. What was the result? This human animal then became a living soul. Manifestly, the breath of life does not refer to oxygen or the ordinary air, for all animal forms breathed that in their nostrils and an ordinarily physical life. What was breathed into the pneuma, or the spirit, only because man was possessed a spirit did he become a living soul. A body of flesh is essential, for without it, the soul cannot manifest on earth, but it must be a body so evolved that it was capable physically, mentally, and spiritually of ultimately expressing the life and consciousness of the supreme intelligence as the individualized consciousness of the incarnating soul. Yet all the incarnation of the soul, the organism must be trained to cooperate with the indwelling soul, that its infinite powers may ultimately be manifested. In other words, only when, through the slow process of evolution, from lower forms, a physical body had been evolved, which contained the necessary functions, faculties, organs, centers, and powers, which were essential for the soul's complete manifestation on earth, did the spiritual man descend and incarnate in that animal form. And because of his presence therein, he gave it a living soul. Thus does the mystic disarm the materialist by gladly accepting all the proved facts of science, if not their materialistic and hence limited interpretation, and show how they all fit into the proper place in the divine plan of manifestation once we understand the fundamentalists of the cosmic philosophy, which explains the great plan. As we have said elsewhere, spiritual beings consciously descended to earth and breathed into the animal, human forms, the breath of life, as recorded in Genesis. That which is called the breath was something with which animal man was only then endowed, a power and capacity added to the mere animal consciousness which he possessed before, for it was the breath of the divine life, a human soul, a spiritual overshadowing. Realize that life here in the physical world is not something separate from the life in the higher realms, but is simply a continuation of that life downward into a denser medium of expression. We also find that the body is not a mere mechanism, but a living and highly intelligent animal with the functions, desires, appetites, and habits of any animal. Hence, it needs training and control, just as does any other high-bred animal, if it is to become a willing, obedient, and efficient servant of its Lord and Master, the indwelling spiritual man. With the incarnation of the spiritual man in the animal body, the great conflict of the two natures for control begins. For the animal nature naturally strives to gratify its desires, while the spiritual man strives to guide it toward constructive ends in accordance with divine law. As we have already said, this animal body of yours has certain desires and tendencies, which are perfectly natural to it, just as they are to any animal. But since you, the immortal self, are dwelling in it, you, the immortal self, must control the animal with its desires and tendencies and make it subservient to the law of being. The lower animals, having no individualized spark of the divine dwelling in them, follow their nature and natural tendencies when not perverted by contact with man. And these tendencies not being perverted are necessarily right and proper, but man, having a higher guidance than instinct, must control the animal tendencies instead of being controlled by them. In fact, it is one of the great aims of human manifestation for the soul to perfect a body so spiritualized and trained that it will do the will of the Father on earth, even as it has done in heaven by the soul. As clearly explained by Jesus, and speaking of the spiritual man within, quote, I came down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will, which hath sent me, that of all the powers and potencies which hath given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day, end quote. I'm trying not to let my dyslexia hit. We thus see why it is that while the real man is an immortal spirit being, created perfect in the heavenly worlds, when he is limited in his expression on earth, not only by a material body, but one which is unfinished and still evolving, only through eons of time and manifesting through such a body during myriads of incarnations, can he gain the experience in material embodiment necessary to dominate completely and control the animal organism and make it truly express the divine consciousness of his real self. It is because the animal body has all the appetites, desires, and inherent selfishness of any animal, and because this continually struggle for unrestricted indulgence, when unhampered by the guidance of the divine consciousness, that St. Paul said, quote, for we know that the law is spiritual, but I, the animal man, am carnal. For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now, if I do that, I would not. It is no more I that do it, but sin or animal desires that dwelleth in me. I find that a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, in bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. St. Paul here clearly distinguishes between the guidance of the spiritual man and the desires of the animal man. Yet the flesh is a thing of habit. It, through the subconscious mind, will repeat mechanically all good impulse as well as bad one. It is not the flesh, which is also always the tempter. In 9 cases out of 10, it is the lower manas, or human mind, which by its creative images leads the flesh into temptation. Oh, there's so many things I could say about that, but I'm not. The higher or spiritual man directs the will. The lower turns it into selfish desire. We therefore see that the fall of man, which the unillumined speculations of theologians have decided was due to the sin of our first parents, was not due to sin at all, but was the fall of the spiritual man into material embodiment as a natural and inevitable result of the law of manifestation. The fall was indeed great, the descent of a celestial being into morality, from the pure, beatific state of being and consciousness of the spiritual world down into a dense and unresponsive animal body, which was dominated by its will to live and propagate its species. This descent into earth conditions was also a great sacrifice. Pause right there. Pause. Time out. Holy crap. People who know me personally know a few things about the other topics that I read about. If anybody reads about Archangel Hillel, you can look up who that actually the embodiment of what that other name is. It tells you the story of how that entity, commissioned by God, individuated itself so that we can all have this experience. Think of this as time. We're going through a glass with the sand. We're falling into density. We're falling into materialism. I don't believe in fallen angels. We're given polarity, which makes things good or evil. Did that make that morning star evil for falling into materialism? Tells you right there. That's how I see our design. You don't have to resonate with any of that. I see that because I've seen myself fall into density, into a body. I saw the big transcending light of what I was a part of, and all of you, if you believe in that, individuating smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to this. Take that with what you may. I believe it's so for myself, because everybody's truth is different. But I do believe that we need to look into these things a little harder. The Council of Nicaea changed a lot of things, a lot of perceptions, and things that you were indoctrinated with and taught are not necessarily true. And a lot of channeled works are agenda-based by factions of other beings who unfortunately want dominion over this plane of existence. So yeah, that's fun. As we have already pointed out, the law of sacrifice must be a principle of divine manifestation. As the creative ray is sent forth into manifestation from the divine, something of its divinity, purity, and power is of necessity sacrificed by the limitations of every successive form through which it expresses, from the ideal thought forms in the universal mind down through their manifestation in ethereal substance, until they reach their densest expression in physical matter. Each step of the descent is a sacrifice of a higher state and degree of consciousness that a lower form may exist. It was brought about by the same great principle of divine love and wisdom, the voice of the deity sent forth, the word that was spoken and sent forth through all spheres, in which the spiritual monad had to manifest to complete his cycle of necessity, or cycle of projection, manifestation, and indrawing. This fall was therefore not a sin, nor due to the use of the sex functions, for the fall began in the higher realms long before those functions were manifested physically in the separated sexes. While the descent of the soul into material embodiment was a fall, it was not a fall for man to use faculties, functions, and as gods, as one of us, the Elohim. For these were the very means given him wherewith to achieve his destiny, to rise to godhood. With this understanding of the real nature of the fall of man, it will be seen that the monstrous doctrine of original sin was but a mistaken medieval deduction from a false premise due to the failure of early church fathers and councils to distinguish between the Adam of the first chapter and the Adam of the second chapter. The same failure that is being made by both parties to the controversy today. The Calvinistic doctrine of original sin holds that Adam in his fall evolved the whole human race, descended from him. Hence depravity and corruption diffused through all parts of the soul, attached to all men. These are held vitiated? Again, hi guys, I'm dyslexic. In all parts of their nature, and on account of such corruption, deservedly condemned of God. Adam's sin is, as penalty, transmitted to all his descendants, both as guilt and as weakness. Even infants are involved in Adam's condemnation. We must remember that this terrible and debasing doctrine is not a teaching inspired by God, nor is it contained in any Bible story, but is the mere opinion of one man living in an age of persecution and bigotry, and who very evidently did not have the enlightenment of direct spiritual inspiration or of a cosmic philosophy to guide his speculations. But it is high time we use a little common sense, not to say spiritual intuition, and stop blindly following after such a debasing idea, just as we have stopped following the far more plausible doctrine of the evil eye. As we have said elsewhere, the exhalation of intellect and man's refusal to follow his inner guidance together with his efforts to subserve the spiritual forces within to bring temporal domination and gratification of the lower senses, passions, and desires, was the original sin of the early races, not the use of the creative powers themselves. This is clearly shown by the fact that the creative powers were given to man by his maker, and he was told to use them. Long before the misused these powers and was cast out of the Garden of Eden. It should be noticed here that there is no time limit placed on the process of the formation of the animal body, and it may well be required the millions of years which both science and cosmic philosophy claim for it. The statement that Adam was formed out of the dust of the ground gives a hint as to the time that must have elapsed before there was any dust, for it must have taken many ages before the land was upheaved above the waters, and still other ages for the rocks thus upheaved to disintegrate through erosion and become dust. We now understand that the so-called days of creation were not days of 24 hours, but vast geological ages. As a matter of fact, geology has proved that the earth was created 6 such days or ages, for the structure of the planet itself shows just 6 vast eras. The Prezoic, or the stage from gaseous fire, mist to dense physical matter, the Archezoic, Proterozoic, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic, or present age, which is still evolving and revealing its wonders. While the Bible was never intended to be a scientific or accurately historical treaty, nevertheless, it is sufficiently accurate to have modern scientific research confirm its general order of creation. For instance, Genesis tells us that there was light several days, eons, before the sun, moon, and stars were created. Only a few years ago, this statement was laughed at in scientific circles, but we now know that the nebula from which our solar system, one of the smallest, was condensed, shone as brilliantly by its own inherent light as those we now preserve in our dead heavens, undergoing the same process according to the universal law of manifestation. Again, science tells us that life began under the water in the primordial zone, the O's, and that as dry land arose out of the waters, the higher forms of life gradually appeared. The Bible gives us precisely the same order of events, the earth being without form, land, and covered with the waters of the deep. As the light appeared, those germs of life in the water were activated and began the unfoldment of their inner patterns in accordance with the law of manifestation. As the land appeared, the higher forms progressively appeared one after the other. First, vegetation, grass, herbs, trees, then moving creatures, reptiles, fowls, mammals, and lastly, man, in almost the exact order of evolution found by science recorded in the rock strata of the earth. Again, we see that when we gain understanding of both evolution and what the Bible says about it, we find there is no conflict between science and the Bible in this respect. As one famous scientific authority says, quote, the spiritually inspiring thing which the biologists have shown us that all life has progressed from the lowest toward the highest. If one does not believe that life has been a progressive development step by step, under the guidance of a coordinating principle, then he has a very poor idea of divinity. For if life has progressed from small beings up to man in, say, 10 million years, where will it be in 10 million years from now? Man is revealed by science as a being who is constantly progressing from glory to glory, changing more and more toward the spiritual image of the Creator, end quote. Ooh, next chapter. Manifesting the creation. Quote, long under the domination of materialism and positive thinking, forgetting and perverting religious ideals, men thought that it was possible to live by the merely logical mind alone. But now, little by little, it is becoming quite evident to those who have eyes that merely by the exercise of logical reason, man will not be able to organize their life on earth. End quote. Tertium Organium Ospensky. I hope we didn't hear. I don't know if that was gunshots or fireworks, but quote, the totality of evolution, like its details, reveals an obvious purpose, which neither selection nor adaptation, nor any of the classical factors can sufficiently explain. By reason of the ideal adaptation, which it implies, this acquired purpose alone allows of the complete operation of the classical factors, natural selection, influence of the environment, sexual selection, segregation, migration, end quote. From the unconscious to the conscious, Geely. Quote, for the law of the spirit of life hath made me free from the law of sin and death, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the spirit, end quote, Romans. Since man is a microcosm of the macrocosm, or an epitome of the universe, to utilize the ideas set forth in the previous chapters, let us here review them briefly as they apply to our own personal life and unfoldment. At first thought, many students find it hard to realize that man's body is an unfinished and unperfected an evolutionary product as it is his personality and his human mind. Yet if we stop to think clearly, we will readily recognize that this is so, for we know that the inner spiritual body represented in the biblical allegory by the first Adam was created as a perfected pattern or ideal type. Generally, this ideal type descended into matter through involution, and then began the slow process of manifesting its perfection through evolution. Thus, evolution progresses according to the degree which the subtle creative forces of the invisible pattern are able to manipulate and make dense physical matter respond. Although for ages it responded only in a crude, rough, general way to that pattern. And even this slow process of overcoming the inertia of matter and making it more responsive to the inner vibrations has been further retarded by man's disobedience, wrong thinking, and mistaken religious teachings. Holy shitballs, they are correct. And this again is written in the early 1800s. I speak about this all the time. And my goodness sakes. My goodness sakes. Ultimately, we must manifest the image of God in which the real or spiritual self is created. But how few of even those who seek to live close to the divine ideal, at least in thought, find it possible at this stage of our evolution to manifest that image as perfect harmony of mind and body, perfect functioning and health of every organ and part. For not only do we find functional disorders due to our ignorance or carelessness of the laws of health, diet, exercise, etc., and to infections, but we also have to meet the hereditary defects of the family in which we have incarnated, as well as the karmic conditions which we bring over from past lives. Again, this is written in the early 1900s. This is like my language. All of which we will be spared us when those conditions have been worked out and our bodies have been fully evolved and perfected. Today, the more we advance, the more sensitive we become to all these personal conditions and also to world conditions. At the faster we work out our personal karma, the more we are able to help redeem the world karma, which we share with the rest of mankind. This gets into timelines. This is one of the mystical meanings of the crucifixion, for the more we become one with the Christ, the more Christ force we have with which to conquer these conditions, and thus help lift the burdens of humanity and say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. At present, our spiritual body is much like a small sapling, which is destined to become a great tree, but which has been planted in the crude soil of an animal body, where it is subjugated to tempestuous gusts and gusts of passion, gnawing desires and scorching emotions. It is therefore still needs the oversight and guiding care of the great gardener, upon whom it must depend during its early stages of growth, or it can become the giant tree whose strength, beauty, and fruitfulness can scarcely be imagined from the appearance of the mere sapling. For the most powerful microscope can discover no trace of pattern of the future tree in the seed, nor does the outer appearance of the sapling give any indication of what its blossom and fruit will be. The very appearance of these are miracles in themselves, yet the pattern of ideal type of the tree and its fruit already exists in the invisible worlds. And as the pattern is materialized through the law of growth, it will continually unfold and determine the size and type of the tree and the kind of flower and fruit. As we have already explained, the body of man is of the earthy, just as it is the seed of the tree. Yet like the seed, it has within it an invisible ethereal pattern, which endeavors to reflect, as far as it has evolved, the perfection of its ideal type, or the spiritual body of the inner man, or real self. Let us think then of our real self, not merely as a vague, shadowy, formless divine essence, but as possessing a perfected and glorious spiritual body, the ideal type which shall ultimately manifest on earth, perfect in every part, organ, and function, and filled with radiant vitality, health, and joy of living. But if our real self is clothed in such a perfection that no inharmony, deformity, disease, sin, sickness, or death can abide in it, why is it that our physical body is so incomplete, imperfect, unresponsive to the real self, and prone to all the ailments to which the flesh is heir? The first explanation is that the physical body is still evolving and has not yet reached a point where the real self can shine through or manifest, except to a very limited degree, just as the life cycle of a giant sequoia tree of California requires many thousands of seasons, years to evolve and unfold the inner pattern from seed to perfected tree. So does the much greater life cycle of the soul require many thousands of seasons or life cycles to bring in its pattern into full manifestation. From seed to perfected man, the master, even when not constantly interfered with, retarded, and pushed back by man's self-made karma. When we note the great prevalence of weakness, sickness, and disease among mankind and the structural and functional imperfections of his body, we realize that in no other animal is its structure so poorly adapted to its posture as in man, even though the disadvantages of the upright position are enormously outweighed by the release of two limbs, arms, from the function of locomotion for the exclusive use of the brain and mind. the enormous influence upon the development of the brain and the greater mental power and intellectual attainments to which the use of the development of the hand permitted expression. Excuse me, it is well known to scientific investigators and psychologists, yet no optical instrument so defective as the human eye, no automobile so inefficient as the body, and no waterworks or system of the electrical conduits which allow the leakage from one part to disable all its neighbors, as the inflammations and diseases of the abdominal and other organs leak or extend from one to the other through mere contact, would find a market in these days of efficiency. When we consider the present imperfect organization of society, with its narrow radical outlooks and antagonisms and wars, its struggles between the so-called classes, its extremes of great wealth and miserable poverty, how hopeless it all would be if we believed that these conditions were as near to the ultimate perfection of man as we could hope to obtain. Yet in spite of all the imperfections in the earth, in man's body and mental activities, and in his organization of society, we find a deep eternal purpose and an ever-present urge, both in the earth, in nature, and in man, towards something higher and better. Even the most undeveloped mentally and the most unawakened spiritually feel a dim inner urge towards higher unfoldment, which, when once awakened, gives them no peace or rest until they begin to work with it. Hence what we're seeing in society right now. Often, however, this inner urge is misinterpreted and man seeks to smother it out, either through excessive self-indulgence or the lower appetites and passions, through a mad whirl of feverish social life, or through incessant and strenuous mental activity, such as according to his degree and type of development. But these attempts to smother out the cry of the inner or spiritual self for expression in the life only increase and make more persistent the conflict and inharmony until finally the suffering which the rebellious personality brings upon itself forces it to appeal to the higher powers, commonly called God, for help. Then a man's stage of evolution begins, the beginning of man's conscious recognition, however dimly at first, of the divine and his dependence upon it. The second explanation is that in addition to the incompleteness of his present stage of evolution, man has to reap, express, and work out the results of karma of his own creating as he goes along, all the sin, sick, and inharmony that he has created in past lives and in the present by the misuse of his creative powers and his God-given materials. For until he recognizes and redeems his creations and thereby learns the lesson, he will never cease creating such obstacles to his advance. When man's creations are inharmonious and destructive in character, their working out and redemption naturally impedes and delays his evolution. The manifestation of the spiritual pattern, just as his creations of peace, harmony, purity accelerate it, hence the divine self must wait patiently for all that man in his pompous ignorance, self-will, and self-indulgence has created to be worked out through the events of his daily life, knowing well that if man will not listen to and strive to follow his divine guidance and live in harmony with the divine law, only suffering, which results from reaping that which he has sown and redeeming that which he has created, can turn his consciousness Godward and awaken him to the necessity of striving consciously to aid his spiritual unfoldment and thereby hastening the perfecting of his evolution. God, in his great love and mercy, knows our imperfect and unfinished state and expects of us only the best we can do, each according to his lights. We could not expect a seedling to blossom and fruit and have become a tree, but we do expect it constantly to turn to the sun, drink in the warm rain, and assimilate the substances of the earth and ultimately build all into perfect growth, and we delight in its upright stalk, in each tender leaf as it unfolds, and in its every effort to grow aright. Just so God never expects his children to accomplish more than their particular stage of development and understanding permits. But he does expect us cheerfully and willingly to do our best, and he delights in our every effort. God's image, in which the real self is made, is not merely the cause which unfolds the pattern of the physical body, but it also focuses and outpictures the God consciousness, the God powers and God love of the divine Father Mother. And if man did not strive to correlate with the power of the inner self, he would never realize his relation to, nor his power as a son of the Father Mother. And in appearance, he would never be more than an ape-like creature. A child inherits the traditions and mental traits, as well as the physical characteristics of his family. But unless it strives to live up to and perfect those traits and traditions, it is an unworthy representative of the family. Further evolution, if it takes place, cannot be an elemental or unconscious affair, but will result solely from conscious efforts towards growth. Man not striving toward evolution, not conscious of its possibility, not helping it, will not evolve. And the individual who is not evolving does not remain in a static condition, but goes down, degrades. This is the general law. Interesting there. With that, guys, I'm going to end that there, trying to keep the readings semi-shorter than normal so that I got more books to read. I mean, obviously, look at all the books. But I feel like this is a good place to stop. The next time we're going to tackle chapter 7 and the continuation of this chapter. It's a lot to absorb, and for the most part, I resonate with just about every bit of this. Heading on the ontological simulated holographic matrix, the patterning in which we are in construction, the waveform, all of that I could throw in there. I will not confuse you, and I'll do on another show. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you would like to support my work, all the links will be below this video. I got a lot done in my house. I'm almost done moving in. I just have a little bit left in storage. Things are working. I still have a lot of like placing of things to do, but a lot got done in the last couple of days, amongst other things going on in life. So also update on Morgan. She's already now received her 3rd IV treatment. She's eating food. She's in renal failure. Trying to reverse it or just let her live as long as she would like to come and hang out with me and be here. So that's also been a not fun ride for me because she keeps me up a lot at night. I'm not getting enough sleep. I think the last 8 days, I might have collectively gotten 6 hours of sleep. And I kind of crashed the last 2 days, like trying to make up my sleep, trying to eat and get back into the patterns of life. So I hope everybody hangs on, shares my stuff, and I am coming back, and I'm going to come back strong. And hopefully we stay this way until I find a job. So until then, sending my love, light, protection, and shielding to each and every one of you. Please guard your spirit, your soul. I hope all of you have a really wonderful and blessed rest of the week. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.